Charlotte, and you are watching The Ugly Atheist. And in today's episode, I wanted to discuss propensity to create stories comes from. As far as we know, the human animal is the only species of animal that is into storytelling. I mean, we don't know that 100%. I mean, there are a lot of intelligent animals, and they each, a lot of the, like ravens, for example, and crows have a distinct language, and so do dolphins and, and whales. But it is not known, or it's actually thought that these other higher intelligence species do not engage in storytelling, at least not to the degree that humans have. Um, so we can go back in our evolutionary family tree back to the earliest known evidence of tool use, and it would be the species that I believe it was the Kenyanthropus, which was a contemporary of Australopithecus, which was what Lucy was. And there is evidence of stone flakes all gathered together, which indicates that there was at least stone tools used to flake off other stones into a usable cutting edge, whether they use that for just cutting meat after they've killed an animal or come upon a carcass, or if they were to use them for hunting. The earliest known use of tools does not necessarily mean that there was language involved. We see chimpanzees making tools with a much less degree of intentionality. A lot of their stone tools were made accidentally, flaking off pieces of rock while they're trying to open a nut, for example. They accidentally flake off some pieces and create a sharper edge. And it's purely by accident, and that might have been how it started with our species as well, or with hominids as well. But at some point, we gained the control or the use of and control of fire. Um, I know after a brush fire, as we've had here in California, supposedly the ground stays warm for a long time as root systems are smoldering underground, creating a lot of heat. And I think maybe our early ancestors, probably Kenyanthropus or the species known as Lucy, probably utilized that heat for warming their communities, huddling together around there and possibly cooking their meat, cooking vegetables or food. And as we discussed in an earlier episode, it's the cooking of food that led to our gut size shrinking and our brains growing. So by Kenyanthropus, that by the time of this 3 million years ago, roughly 3.5 million years ago, they have already started towards that trend of larger brain size and smaller guts. So by the time we get to Homo habilis, is I think about 2 million years ago, we start to see the more controlled use of fire, where they're deliberately setting fires and using them to cook their food, all of their food pretty much, especially the meat. And of course, that accelerated the evolution of larger brain sizes and smaller intestinal tract and digestive systems. And but what I'm getting at with describing all of this backstory, this back history, is there's something unique about the presence of fire that is not seen in other primates. Well, the presence of fire creates a behavior that we don't see in other primates or in other social animals. And that is the forcing of your community to all look in towards a central point. Um, just as a point of comparison, if you look at a group of wolves or a group of, or a group of baboons or any other primate, um, when they are in, they're interacting with each other in their communities, they almost never look at each other in the face for very long. There's not a prolonged gazing into each other's eyes or faces. Wolves never do it. Even the snow monkeys in Japan, when they're all communing in a hot spring and warming up, they're always kind of facing away from each other, possibly looking out for danger. And but what the presence of fire has sort of causes an animal to do, is to all look inward towards a focal point, all looking into each other's eyes and studying each other's faces. And I think this is probably in after a long day of hunting and foraging, and after the feasting is done for the night, and you have a fire going in the community, and you have a bunch of a certain kind of animal with nothing but a couple hours of time as it starts to get later into the evening, and they are just looking into each other's faces. And I think this probably leads to a greater sense of self when you are, imagine how you feel when you're in a group setting, if everybody's sitting in a circle. I don't know if any of you have ever been to AA or anything like that, or any kind of support group. Everybody's sitting kind of in a circle, and you're all looking at each other. And when you are talking, everybody's eyes are on you. So you have a very uh, accentuated sense of self. Like, I, I obviously exist, and people are staring, they're listening to me, and they're, they're focused on me. So I think in the scenario where you have a central focal point, which is the fire, and everybody's facing in the same direction, that is at each other, looking at each other, I think that is in those quiet moments where you can study each other's facial expressions. This might be where we began to uh, attempt storytelling, um, where we're using not just gestures, and definitely probably using a lot of facial gestures early on, but as our vocal cords began to become more useful to us in terms of communication. I imagine, I don't know when that might have happened. It could have been as early as the Kinesianthropus I discussed earlier, um, or it could be maybe Homo habilis um, had some more controlled use of their vocal cords. But I think these are the moments where not only language probably began to become more sophisticated, but probably music as well, singing music. According to Jonathan Haidt, he has a quote that says, "The human mind is a story processor, not a logic processor." And I think that logic, I think it is a logic processor. And I think a lot of animals have an innate sense of logic, where um, they understand uh, like a causal chain of events to varying steps out. Like a raven will understand more steps um, into a causal chain of events versus something like a mouse or, of course, an ant or something. But we are, according to Jonathan Haidt, our brains are focused on processing stories. The first kinds of stories that were often told, according to an article I read, an article from the Human Journey, I believe it was that publication, where it said um, gossip was sort of the first kinds of stories we would tell each other. And gossip served a very important function in a community where you would understand where the kind of boundaries were, what you can get away with saying, what, you know, changing a power dynamic by spreading either good or bad information about somebody, building alliances. So gossip was sort of the first sort of stories that were being told around, excuse me, were being told around a fire. Um, and the gossip started to become not necessarily just about the people in the community, but people in other communities they've encountered during travels or during a hunting expedition, um, or strange things they've seen that they couldn't explain or understand, and um, the general sense of the presence of deceased ancestors. Um, this became sort of the underpinnings of a proto religion where um, it's these innate feelings of being led by the spirits of ancestors or of spirits of the forest or the environment, um, were conveyed into language, and then that sort of became a belief system within a community. And a lot of the early religions had that sort of an underpinning. Um, and another point made by the article in that the human journey says that in prehistoric times, people who were fascinated by the lives of other people were more successful. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, if you are the kind of member of a community or family or tribe that is fascinated by the lives of others in your community, that makes you more knowledgeable about what the needs of the community are. It helps build alliances because you are seen as somebody who is not only just continually present, but continually interested and inquiring about other people's lives, and you gain popularity in that respect, and you could be assume a position of leadership in your community. And so, and I believe that's what they meant by success, is when you reach a point of respect um, in your community, that life becomes easier for you, people do things for you, and your life becomes easier and your opinions have more weight. So gossiping really is what you could say it's a type of proto storytelling, where if you have some juicy gossip and you want to convey that to your community around the campfire, and you've got a couple of hours with which to do it, and you're trying to get the attention of everybody in the group, you're going to try to frame that gossip in a thought, not a thought provoking necessarily, but a engaging way. So you kind of add embellishments. If storytelling did not begin with Homo habilis, then it probably began with Homo erectus. But at some point before modern humans emerged, I believe storytelling was alive and well. We see evidence of such a community with Neanderthals and Neanderthal sites where they've excavated their the remains of their fires and their jewelry and their clothing. Well, not necessarily their clothing, but I guess the sewing needles that they used to sew together their clothing. Um, but humans have since become clearly a storytelling species. In fact, I work in advertising, so storytelling is of critical importance in that line of work, because everything that you're trying to sell has a story of how it could fit into your life or what it could do for your life, what kind of improvements you can expect. It's all focused on the listener, on the viewer. So next time you're sitting in front of a fire with your family or friends, and you kind of look into each other's faces, and you can see the sort of different kinds of lighting that affect their faces and how that changes. You know, you can see how a scary story would almost come naturally in that kind of a setting where you are um, seeing faces lit from beneath with a lighting that is not seen during the day. It's kind of an orangish glow, and you can see our propensity for pattern making. And if you're gazing into the flickering flames, you can see all kinds of fanciful creatures dancing around, or familiar things that are slightly distorted, or it's just a natural environment that invites imagination to just go wild. So, staring into a fire, you can almost just invent a story out of nothing. Um, so that's more or less my hypothesis is as to where story and possibly music and language, or where how music and language probably became reached the next level of sophistication was probably in sitting around a campfire, just looking into each other's faces and it giving you your own sense of self and your or accentuating your own sense of self and um, igniting your imagination and uh, all being fueled by a need for social cohesion. So, um, and I think obviously story is still important to us to this day, as is why advertising is so effective. In getting people to buy a product. It's almost like an extended or an abstract form of gossip. You know, like, hey, this is what everybody's doing now. Don't feel left out. Don't miss out. Or this product's going to change your life. Um, and I think that's the nature of storytelling, where we say something that's almost too fantastical to believe, but we sort of suspend our disbelief just for the sake of enjoying the story. I know, all the products we see advertising for on online, we know that it's not really going to have a drastic effect on our lives, but we like the way it makes us feel to think that it might, so we buy it anyway. Like, oh, that new outfit's not gonna, you know, make me look like this model at all, but I like the idea of looking sort of like that, so I'll, get the outfit or whatever. But I think that's kind of the nature of storytelling, the beauty of storytelling, the the good, the bad, and the ugly side of storytelling is that it sort of is a departure from reality and um, a momentary break from the mundane, from the fears and worries of life, where you're engaged in something different that is, a story about how somebody else might be having a problem or how they're resolving it. And that's, of course, needless to say that we use language and stories to convey important information too, not just for entertainment. But um, yeah, I think the main point, the main function, I should say, of storytelling originally was just social cohesion. I think I'm just rambling on enough here, and I'll end it there. I'm Charlotte. You're watching The Ugly Atheist. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.